Too funny.
I thought I saw Brenda on there, Sarah, but did we lose her?
Nope, she's here.
Okay, all right, so let's call the meeting to order. I'm Karen Parkhurst. Welcome to the DeMarco Group and the rest of us here.
I'm Sal Pietropalo.
Nashbach.
Tom Schwartz.
And you all know Doug here.
Yeah,
So
nice to see everyone.
with just a stroke of luck, I ended up as chairperson of this affordable housing committee set up by the Canandaigua Town Board. We're new. Our first meeting was in April. And since that time, we've had presentations from Matt Horn, from MRB, from the Genesee Housing Authority, Andy Timon, and the Local Development Corp in Canandaigua. Ryan Wallace from Solar Factory. I don't know if you're familiar with that. And last meeting was a week and a half ago, and that was Carrie Book from the Alice Project. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Are you?
Nah.
Alice stands
And
for
I am not either.
Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed, which is an element of individuals that have housing needs, affordable housing needs. So she was great because she had a lot of statistics, and we really need the statistics. So now we're looking at developers who can help in this effort, and
We need the solutions.
we need solutions, exactly. And Doug says you guys have solutions. But I don't believe everything he says.
Well, but there's another piece to this too, if I just jump in for a quick second. And actually, I was just finishing another meeting here with the Rochester Regional Collective Impact Regional Climate Impact Association. And they have some interesting data that's hot off the press, literally just within the hour. And this is something that the project, specifically the Creekview project that DeMarco's been working with us on a number of years already is working to address. And I think it's so important, is the cost of energy when we're having the conversation about affordable housing. The average person in a middle income bracket, 3% of their salary or their revenue goes towards energy usage of their home. In the low to very low, specifically for Ontario County, that number is 16.9%. They pay 5 times as amount of their salary in energy cost as the other individual. Now, obviously, there's a lot of ways to look at percentages and you run those calculations, but when it comes to when we're having conversations about affordable housing, energy and utility costs are absolutely a part of that. And that's one of the things that I think is so incredible about the story with Creekview. And Greg and Paul, maybe if you can touch on that as you're kind of telling us a little bit about the Creekview apartments and kind of how that came to be and how that works, and just kind of share some of that with us.
Sure. Greg, you want to jump in on that? Phase 1 and then what phase 2 has been proposed as?
Sure, happy to. Yes, Doug, we're equally proud of and excited about Creekview Phase 1. That was the first affordable housing project sponsored by HCR. That was passive house, that incorporated passive house techniques in New York State. And really what passive house is really about the envelope of the building and making sure that there are no cracks or crevices and there's major insulation in there, and by tightening up the building. And then when you tighten up the building, you need to bring in fresh filtered air. And so that's called an ERV. And so what happens is it takes very little energy because of this tight building that we have enveloped around these buildings, and then the utility is diminished in terms of the cost of it because it doesn't take much to do that, to keep things warm and keep things cold. So the utility allowances for our residents in a one-bedroom apartment, it's like $50 a month that they pay for utility. And for a two-bedroom, it's about $70. And for a three-bedroom, it's about $80 or $85, which is very affordable when it comes to supplying heat, air conditioning, hot water, plug load, and things like that. So that's Creekview Phase 1 that is built net zero ready, which means all the design features have been installed, ready to go off the grid. Creekview Phase 2, we are going to incorporate all those design techniques and then actually install energy producing equipment on site, such as solar, and we would use geothermal technologies as well. And so that is net zero, not net zero ready like Phase 1, but net zero, and actually get off the grid, and thereby reducing the cost for the resident, for the low income resident. And Doug, that's kind of an alarming statement that you make for middle income at 3% and low income at 16.9% of their salary. That is pretty alarming. So both of these projects kind of are directed at that goal of energy efficiency.
Is Phase 2 normal renters still going to be rent assisted, or what rent qualified?
Greg,
Yes,
did you have any questions?
that is those are going to be income qualified residents, residents that are at 50% and 60% of area median income, very similar to or identical to Phase 1.
So just so everybody's aware, right, Greg, and correct me if this is incorrect information, but I believe you have 3 phases within the 4th phase being market rate, right? And then the first 3 phases all having the income approach.
That is correct. Phase 1, 2, and 3, as it's currently approved, is for affordable housing in the 4th phase, which is the most southern parcel. Currently we're contemplating that as a market rate project.
So are all of these projects in the same general area on County Road 10? County Road 10,
They're
right?
next to each other.
All next to each other.
So I guess the question is, do you get grants, subsidies, free money from the state or the federal government to help with the cost of the solar or the geothermal, which is, I would think, a lot more expensive than having heat pumps and mini splits? Yes or no?
Yeah, that's a good question. With this particular project, Creekview Phase 2, we are leveraging money from NYSERDA. This project was awarded what's called the Building of Excellence. And a couple of years ago, there were 10 projects that were awarded $1 million each for their design. And if and when we build it, or others build their other projects, then you get the $1 million. And so what we do is we take that $1 million and leverage that into all the sources and uses that it takes to build these projects. And the hard cost for this project is 17 million. So as you can imagine, that's an important piece, but there are other sources that we need to acquire. And as Doug alluded to, this project has gone into the 9% low-income housing tax credit round back in August the 26th, and we're hopeful to learn if this project has been awarded those low-income housing tax credits sometime in mid to late November. At least that's what we're hearing. This project has gone into the state a couple times, but wasn't awarded. Actually, nothing was really awarded in this Farmington, Canandaigua area the last 2 or 3 rounds. That's more of a glaring issue and a perception issue that HCR has, that they've put a lot of money into this area, and they're concerned that there is no longer the need. And that's where it's incumbent upon developers and municipal elected officials to really step out and say, look, there is still a need. The community is doing well, but there's still a need, and we can prove that there's a need by our market studies that show a low capture rate for these low-income individuals. We can show we've got 100 people on our waiting list. So there's still a need for these projects, but we have to ring the bell and really kind of press forward with them on this.
Is there anything the town isn't doing to help grease the wheels?
No, the town and is definitely, I don't know if we'll use the word grease the wheels, but definitely has been very supportive with Creekview 1 and Creekview 2 and the DeMarco Group in general. Anything more would be helpful too, from another elected official, whether it be Senator Helming or whoever, picking up the phone and calling HCR saying, this is a priority. This project checks all of our boxes, and we really want to get this project in because it will benefit our community. It's a numbers game. 130 applications are submitted on an annual basis. 30 to 35 get funded. There is a rubric for awards, but they also spread things out from region to region and developer to developer.
I would think you guys would be the poster childs for the next technology or whatever with this net zero commitment. Are there lots of developers out there like you that have embraced the net zero scheme?
No, there are a handful, but there's not lots, and primarily because it's new and it could be very expensive, and the guarantees come from the developer. So if you can't achieve whatever you have obligated yourself, then it's up to the owner to either financially support it or, it's a red flag against you if you can't. So developers don't necessarily want to stick their neck out too far. And while I appreciate the fact that you think that we are the poster child, and I feel that we are too, again, it is competitive and it is by region, and Finger Lakes region, is Rochester, city of Rochester, and then all the way over to Geneva and even further, Seneca Falls. So all point north and south of that. So there's a lot of strong developers in the Rochester area that do seem to get their fair share. And Conifer, Home Leasing, those are two, just to name a couple.
So Greg, hopefully this funding comes through and you guys proceed with the next phases. But if the application isn't approved, is there a backup plan? Does this just delay the project? What happens then? And are there opportunities to assist? Obviously, it sounds like some phone calls and advocacy work could assist. But
yeah,
what's the
it's a
contingency
really good
plan?
question. Yeah, it's a really good question, and this is our third go around with this particular project, third time that we've submitted it. And we'll submit it again. Again, we feel that this is a strong project on many different levels. We bring multiple sources into the deal, but the key component here is low-income housing tax credits. And without an award of low-income housing tax credits, this project doesn't get off the ground. This is a $20 million, $21 million project. 15 to 16 million of it is hard cost. But the biggest source that is involved in this project is low-income housing tax credits, and that will generate about 14 million of the sources into this deal. So without that, there just isn't another way to build this project. For
How
low
many
income housing.
units were you planning on building in this phase?
Yeah, thanks, Brenda. It's 96 units is in phase one, and the other second and third phases are also 96 as well.
Greg, maybe could you just spend a second, because we have some new people involved with us that maybe are not familiar with Creekview and the whole proposed project there, the build out. Could you just spend a moment touching base on that, so everybody's aware of that?
Yeah, Paul, you want to jump in, and because you kind of headed up the whole site development there and kind of what the plan was for the 4 parcels?
Sure. So Creekview is, as I think most know, along County Road 10. It sits between County Road 10 on the western side, between that and the Canandaigua outlet. The project is 80 acres overall. We worked with the town to go through the MUO, mixed use overlay rezoning project, where the underlying zoning was community commercial. And we wrote the local law for this project to support multifamily residential, specifically, as Doug alluded to earlier, 3 phases of affordable and 1 phase of market rate. We broke it up into 4 equal sections of 96 units, with the first phase delivered in the center of the project. The first phase included constructing a town dedicated road. It included bringing in public water, a pump station that would serve all 4 phases, along with pedestrian amenities on the interior, a pathway along County Road 10 connecting down to the southern portion of the commercial district, Recreation Drive. And then also with the first phase of the 96 units, we built the community building that is servicing the multi-family residential units, the first phase of Creekview. That's kind of the big picture of the project. The second phase is just north of phase 1. It included expansion of the community building to serve the next 96 units, or the second phase of affordable, as well as expansion of the utilities to service that phase. As I said, all of the infrastructure really for all 4 phases was brought in and was born by phase 1. So that a lot of the costs to bring the overall project to market were front loaded to some extent. We've worked with the town Department of Public Works to solve some capacity issues as it related to water and sewer, and have worked closely with the planning board during approval stages of the project. And we currently have approval for phase 2 that has somewhat of a sunset on it. The provision, if we don't start construction or pull building permits within a year of when those approvals were granted and plans signed, we would have to go back through that process again. So the funding that Greg is alluding to is really necessary for us to move forward. If we don't receive that this round, we'll have to look very closely at timing of future phases of funding for affordable housing. Big picture, if we feel that affordable housing is not going to be funded, would we look at retooling this development and doing it all market rate? We have given some consideration to that. There's a lot of infrastructure that's been put in place that one single phase of affordable and the rents that come along with that would not allow us to sit idle on this for forever. But we've been pursuing those final approvals from HCR or the ward from HCR over the last couple of years. And I think, we'd rely on Greg and his expertise, whether there's, increasing probability in future rounds of funding, but, we're not at a point where we're going to make any knee-jerk reactions and retool the project at this point. But, every time we go in for the funding, we're optimistic. We have a good project. We tried to put forth a very competitive application, and we're hopeful that we hear something in November. But if we were to change course, obviously we'd come back and talk to the town before we made any real plans to do so.
Paul and Greg are being very, very modest, and let me just jump in here for a quick second, because unless you have a developer like DeMarco that has the political will to buy into doing a project like this and affordable housing like this, it's not going to happen. Paul mentioned pump station in passing. I think that was a $750,000 pump station that if you don't have a developer that has that ability, it's not going to happen. The water project, we called it a joint public-private partnership, right? But you had a situation where the neighboring municipality essentially was controlling the water for the town of Canandaigua in that area. And they said, no, you can't build that, right? We don't want those type of people living here, quote unquote, is what I heard, okay?
Yep.
So until you have, and then so we actually installed a whole new water line. I can't even tell you the number of phone calls I had, people calling, complaining, saying, you're installing a new water line on the opposite side of the road where there's already a water line. But until you have somebody, and I remember specifically Mr. DeMarco we were sitting in a conference room, we were all together trying to figure out, okay, how do we make this happen? And he said, I believe his words were, I want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem, and I'm willing to invest the money to go ahead and make this happen. Until you have a developer that brings that attitude to the table, you're spinning your wheels. So we're very fortunate with DeMarco that they've done this and they're willing to work with us, and they're bringing 400 new units online when this is fully built out. But that's a challenge. It's hard to find that.
So are
Paul, have you worked with a nonprofit partner on any of this project?
I'll let Greg weigh in on
Yeah.
all of the different partnerships. He's a lot more well suited to answer that.
Yeah, I'll jump in here, Paul. We have partnered with some apartments that have been designated first come, first use for them, but we have not joined a not-for-profit group as a joint venture ownership in the deal. There are different levels that HCR will give you points for on your application. And one is supportive housing, one is more comprehensive supportive housing by having 30% of your units be set aside for a particular agency. And then there's the highest level, which is a 50-50 split in ownership with a not-for-profit. And each one of those garners you a couple extra points on your application. We have, with Creekview Phase 1, we partnered with Ontario ARC to set aside 15 units for them to have priority use. If they bring a client or someone here, they can jump our waiting list. So if we've got 100 people on the waiting list, but they bring somebody over, they can go right to number one. We are working with FLACRA on Phase 2 and doing a similar agreement with them. And both of those agencies then need to not only refer them to our project, but then also provide case management and other social and economic assistance to the resident. So just not kind of a dumping ground. They're there to help and support them. And that's what both of those agencies have promised. And we have this partnership with them on the supportive housing, but not the fullest extent where we're actually joint venturing with them and they share in the ownership.
Okay, because Family Promise is looking for something like that, but we don't want any ownership of the property or the units. But we have families that come through our program. We're ready to move them into the community. There's no place they can afford. We have subsidies to help them with the rent, and we stay with them for at least a year in case management. So, yeah, I was
Brenda,
wondering if you had someone.
Yeah, I'd be real happy to spend some time with you and I understand your agency a little bit more. And it doesn't have to be exclusively with one agency. We can split that percentage and maybe 7 units go here and 8 units go there. And again, it's the same concept. You can jump to the top of the list, but then you have to provide case management, case study, and case support. So,
So could that help your low income tax credit application if you were to add?
Yes, it does.
Great.
Okay. And yeah, happy to talk to you more about what you do and the good things that you can accomplish for our potential residents.
Okay.
Well, we as a town, I feel like have come so far too, and Greg and Paul, I wanted you to know this too, that, you know, I remember when we first started having conversations, and Tom was planning board chair, and we started first having these conversations, I actually had one of our elected officials say to me, and I still, because I heard it so many times and I'm so frustrated by it, you might sense that from me, we don't want those people living in our community. One of our current elected officials said that to me, to the point where now we have an affordable housing project team. Now we've actually, for 2022, this is one of our top priorities. So the town is evolving also. And as we're also learning more and we're connecting with more people and we're really understanding the needs. I mean, even most recently, we had a joint effort with the city and the town, and we were exploring some different things and having a conversation with the Ibero-American League out of Rochester and understanding the need for affordable housing and some of the things going on. And just had a similar conversation with Yates County, had a conversation today with economic development from Genesee County. There is a dire need for affordable workforce housing in our region. And Karen, you and I've talked about it from an economic development perspective so many times. So, you know, there's such a need, and we're learning, and I think that our perception is changing also, I guess is what I would say.
It's becoming very clear that the need for case management in the affordable housing environment, at least it is to me. So I appreciate what Brenda had to say. But my question is, do you have a management company that handles your rental applications? And are they capable of doing case management or what?
Yeah, that's a good question too, Karen. The DeMarco Group is made up of 3 primary companies, and we have other ones too. But it is a property management company called Baldwin Real Estate. It is a construction company called DeMarco Constructors, and it is a contractor rental called Admar Supply, which we have a store right in on 332 on the west side of 332. Those are the primary companies. And so, yes, we develop it, we build it, and then we manage it. And the property management company manages over 3,000 apartments, New York State wide. Half of them, maybe 3/4 of them, are affordable or subsidized apartment communities. And the others are market rate and commercial space. Paul, I think we're up over 2 million square feet of commercial space, or somewhere about
Correct.
there. And we're also branching out into other states as well, and in North Carolina, and we've built in New Jersey and all over kind of the Northeast region. So those are the three primary companies: the construction company, the property management company, and Admar Supply. But to answer the last part of your question, which was case management, we do not do case management. We are property managers. We collect rent. We operate the facility. We rely either on our not-for-profit partners, or we connect our resident with another human service agency. But we're not equipped to do that. We're not certified to do that. We leave that to the folks that are and have the great resources and the certified people that can do that.
But you do have a method to determine eligibility for the affordable housing developments that you do, correct? Is that part of your management?
Yes.
company?
Yes, everybody who lives at one of these affordable apartment communities has to be income eligible. So we have to go through an extensive and comprehensive assessment of all their income and assets to make sure that they income qualify. So everybody goes through that process, and depending upon what level that we've talked about, and we've talked about 60% of area median income or 50% of area median income. We have two different income bands, and so they have to income qualify, and depending upon what income band they're in, then they pay that particular rent. So one bedroom for a 60% renter might be, and I'm just using this as an example because I don't know it off the top of my head, might be $625 for a one bedroom for 60%. It might be $550 for a 50% renter. But there is no rental assistance. In subsidized apartment communities, people pay 30% of their monthly income, no matter what that income is. That's subsidized. This is affordable. This is low income. But everybody pays the same rent depending upon what income band that they're in.
So it would be to our benefit and your benefit to have you hook up with some of these organizations, like Family Promise, that can manage some case management in your facilities. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, you're definitely hearing that we would welcome, because there are residents who have challenges and just need some support, and some need more than others. And we welcome any agency that would like to come in and provide support for the residents in any capacity. And we have a community space that we could put on seminars, or we could put on workshops, and whether it be for home buying, or whether it could be, mental health, or whatever the case is, or learning how to run a bank account. I mean, simple things that are simple to us, but are more challenging to others. So we would welcome any case management support at any one of our apartment communities.
The other thing, and I love working with some of our developers that we've been talking to about affordable housing and workforce housing, Greg and Paul. We've had conversations with them in the past, and I'm sure we will again in the next phases. Like, for instance, about connecting with Pactive, and then so that there's actually employment, right, and workforce, and even public transportation to and from the County Road 10 over to Pactive. And then there's another piece of this that I've started really learning more about as I've been kind of talking about affordable housing, that I think is incumbent upon the town. And Karen, with your involvement with the Parks and Rec Committee, is the Parks and Recs, the arts and cultural aspects of this is absolutely all part of this, as we as we build a community that is open and welcoming, and then also providing options, right, and opportunities for our residents that live at Creekview Apartments.
So how would we use the good parts about our town to help DeMarco get this HCR money?
Maybe explain just what the process is with whatever HCR stands for and where the flow of funds actually comes from. Is this the state or through local banking
It's,
establishments, or
Great.
give us
Yeah.
a Cliff Notes version of that if you would.
it stands
Please,
for
Greg.
Homes and Community Renewal.
Okay.
There, ding, ding,
Where's the
ding,
dough
that's
come
correct,
from?
Karen, you got it.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Love Google.
So Homes and Community Renewal, that is correct. HCR, that is a state-run agency. The federal government gives each state federal low-income housing tax credits. And based on the number of people that are in your state, you get a certain number of tax credits. Each state has to come up with what's called a qualified allocation plan, or a QAP, as we like to call it in our industry. And the QAP, or the QAP, is something that sets up how these federal tax credits are provided to developers. And so once or twice a year, it was once a year for a long time. In the last 2 years, they've gone to twice a year, same dollars. They kind of split it. It's not like there's more money or more tax credits that coming in. But once a year, they have this competitive 9% tax credits that are given or that are awarded based on people's application. So these are federal tax credits given to the state. The state decides how the tax credits are awarded. And again, the state does about 30 to 35 projects, ranging somewhere between $750,000 to $1.4 million of tax credits that can be used on an annual basis for these developers.
So it's a tax credit.
Does that
against
answer your question,
total
Tom?
revenue?
Sorry?
What, okay, tax credit is kind of a mystery to me. Is this a credit against total revenue, total?
Okay,
income?
so that's a real good question, in that if
It's
the
not
DeMarco
really
Group is
money.
awarded, if the DeMarco Group is awarded $1 million in tax credits, that means we take that $1 million and we sell those tax credits to an investor or a syndicator, and sometimes they are banks or insurance agencies or multifamily funds. And we sell them, and it could be between 85 cents to 95 cents on the dollar. And then that fund or that private investor can use that $1 million of tax credits every year for 10 years. So that $1 million times 10, that's $10 million that are coming into the deal. And what's that worth to the investor? Well, that might be 90 cents on the dollar. So I'm going to give them $10 million of tax credits that they can use that they can use 900, if they buy them for 90 cents on the dollar, then I only get $9 million worth of equity that comes into the deal, but they can use $1 million against their tax liability. It's not a credit, it's actual a deduction off their tax liability. I said that in reverse. It's not a deduction, it's actually a credit against their tax liability. Have I confused you, Tom? I'm sorry. That wasn't very succinct.
Well, it's a lot of hocus pocus for sure. But you sell these credits at a discounted or a present value for somebody to use over a period of 10 years.
Yeah, see, I could have just said that.
Well, the HCR has a number of different programs also, and the one that Greg's talking about there, but HCR has been involved in a number of the projects that, truthfully, I guess the way I would say it is that we've cut the ribbon on in the last couple of years. Happiness House, Trolley Station, Liberty Apartments, Creekview Apartments. I mean, I always know it's an HCR project when Winnie shows up to cut the ribbon. So that immediately tells me that it's an HCR project.
Exactly.
Sheldon.
That's right.
It just seems confusing, but I guess that's the way it works.
Well, but Greg, I think I've heard you say a couple of times now, you've used approximately 100. Is that the number that's about on your waiting list currently?
Yes, yes. That's over 100 people that are on our waiting list.
And so I just heard on Friday that Trolley Station has 50 people on their waiting list, and that's a 48-unit apartment project with 50 people on the waiting list, okay? And I just also heard on Friday that Liberty Apartments, which is our veterans project, which is a 48 apartment project also, has over 500 people on the waiting list. So when you're talking about need and demand, it's real. I mean, just totaling up those numbers.
Right.
How many units?
That's
are up
exactly
at the
correct.
Vets Hospital?
I'm sorry, say again.
How many units are up at the Vets Hospital?
Currently, I don't know. Well, actually, I don't even know.
Because
they're
that was
expanding.
another
Yeah,
one they
they're
were trying to.
Right.
Do you partner with an organization like the Veterans Administration? It seems to me they should be able to provide case management for,
Forget about case management, money.
well, I know, but they need that boosts their power in the government side.
Let the VA worry about the case management.
So Greg and Paul, this is kind of moving away from Creekview a little bit, but just in terms of the overall scope of affordable housing, we've been talking today about rental specifically. But as a developer in the affordable housing sphere, what do you see as the challenges or maybe opportunities for developing on scale affordable units that involve some sort of ownership component or an opportunity to build equity within the project?
Build equity for who? The resident?
For the resident, yeah.
Yeah, that can be done. That's not something that we do or I'm all that familiar with. But there can be affordable housing units that after the compliance period, after 10 years, the project could be purchased or the units could be purchased by the resident. Don't see that done very often because it's typically not, it sounds good in theory, but it doesn't necessarily work all that well from what I'm understanding.
And that 10-year compliance is related to the tax credit?
10-year tax credits, correct,
Yeah.
correct.
Theoretically, at the end of 10 years on Creekview, could you convert that to condominiums?
No,
Condominium
No.
ownership?
no, we have a regulatory agreement that is recorded with the state for 30 years.
Okay,
So,
that's kind of maybe what you're thinking of.
Well, and so the other thing that, and again, I always think Canada was very unique, and I think in a lot of ways we are on cutting edge and leading a lot of municipalities. What I think that we're doing with Uptown and the form-based code specifically provides so many unique opportunities. And I know I just had a meeting in here on Friday with one of our other new large landowners who's building up there. And they specifically, I think we use the word bridge. They're looking for the bridge, maybe not quite the direction that you said, Nash, but maybe something in between with what Paul and Greg are talking about with Creekview, right? Where, and the way they're going about it is providing an opportunity, and I know this is going to sound really complicated, but basically providing an opportunity. Paul alluded to all of the infrastructure costs, and that's a huge cost for developers, right? So that they retain ownership of the land while allowing the individual to actually own the actual housing structure. This bridge of something in between. So it's not always rent. It's not as much rent as what they would pay there, because they're able to recoup those, what I would say, infrastructure costs through the rent over an extended period of time. But the housing unit itself, you know, that actually becomes owned by the individual. So there's any number of different models, I guess, to look at. Greg or Paul, I don't know if you've been involved in anything like that before or not, or heard anything with that. So
I have not, Doug. In my time with DeMarco, we haven't done anything like that. You know, it's more like akin to what single family residential developers do, where, you know, they're actually selling real property to individuals. But, you know, how do you do it in a manner of it being qualified as affordable? You know, right now challenges are pursuing those approvals, entitlements, the investment of infrastructure, rising construction costs, all those things that everyone's seen and reading about and hearing on the news are realities out there. A lot of our current projects that we are either pursuing funding for or have funding for, and now we're trying to deliver, are, you know, to no shock of anyone, over budget, just given what we've seen in the last, you know, 6 months in particular. You know, some costs are up 400% on some commodities. It's absolutely a very, very challenging time, but we haven't done anything outside of these apartment community developments where we're delivering multi-residential units, kind of consolidating those costs into a more dense delivery mechanisms is kind of the model we follow versus, you know, less dense patio home or condominium type development.
Can you just talk a little bit about that for a second? Also, the approvals and the regulations and that sort of stuff. I mean, so Creekview was really our first largest mixed use overlay project. And so we kind of learned together through that, much like we're learning together with some of the developers now in the form-based code for Uptown. And there's always room for us to improve, but I also know that there's a series of regulatory approvals that are needed, whether it's the county, et cetera. And I know that Paul worked very diligently with us for, it seems like 10 years, right, to get those approvals.
You know, it was actually, you know, although somewhat lengthy, you know, all the approvals that we achieve on our development projects have layers of different jurisdictional approvals. You know, local, this was led with town board on the zoning law change, and then planning board as the agency that was reviewing and making recommendation to town board. Outside of those two local approvals, we were working with New York State DEC on the wetland survey that was required, establishing what out of that 80 acres was developable land, which it's approximately about half of it's wetland that's in a buffer area, as you'll recall. And then approvals with, Doug mentioned, we started with the town of Hopewell for water, and that was met with resistance by that agency. So each project has its own unique set of circumstances. We also had to layer in sewer. We had to do a sewer use study. We had to do a capacity analysis for a project of this size and forecast out what our sanitary impact was going to be on the existing infrastructure system that's there. We have certain limitations that we're talking with Ontario County Public Works about for future phases. You know, so that upfront cost of pursuing these what we call soft costs, architectural engineering fees on a project like Creekview, it's in the, high, $500,000 to $750,000 of architectural engineering fees before you even put a shovel in the ground. So they're big numbers. And when you build a multi-phase project, again, back to that front loading of a lot of costs. So Creekview has right now 96 units with not only the hard cost and the infrastructure of a pump station of approximately $750,000, water main, roads, et cetera. Now we have all those soft costs that you're hoping to capitalize on for future phases of 96 units each. And the architectural services fees that come with every phase are typically for those buildings we're delivering on for that next phase, but we try not to reinvent the wheel, and we use a pretty similar footprint for each phase. So you're, again, trying to go back and capitalize on those initial soft costs that are spent up front to benefit future phases.
Right. Well, and you mentioned, the infrastructure there, the water, and let me just touch on that for a second. So I think that's one of the challenges that all of our developers deal with, and I hear it quite routinely. But like Paul mentioned, that pump station, right? That pump station's got to go to a sewer line that's got to wrap back around and connect to the system. Well, and then we're constantly arguing with the county about whether or not there's even the capacity, whether or not they'll approve the next phase. And they're wanting their sewer lines on Lakeshore Drive upgraded at the cost of the developer. Now, let me just explain to you how this works. The county says, oh, the developer will pay for it, right? Let the developer, make the developer replace all those sewer lines and everything else and get those up to today's modern standards, right? But guess what? The developer's got to pass that expense on, right, to that unit. Well, now that unit's not so affordable anymore by the time so there's a lot, I see it every single day. There's a lot of government regulations that adds to the cost of these units in this construction, and then it becomes not so affordable anymore.
Yep, that's a great point, Doug. And that was really the straw that broke the camel's back as to why we chose to not pursue water delivery from the town of Hopewell, as they were putting on our project very unique and extraordinary circumstances to service our project that were not customary in any type of typical development scenario. So we would have borne approximately twice the normal cost of servicing this project with water hadn't the town of Canandaigua stepped in and said, we have a solution, we'll work with you, we'll bring water up the west side. And it still cost us more than what would have been the preferred method, which is a standard connection to the town of Hopewell, who was right across the street from us, but it certainly was not twice the cost that it would have been had the town not stepped in and helped, where Hopewell was giving us a very, very unique set of circumstances that they wanted us to adhere to. So you're right. There are a lot of different set of circumstances that every developer faces on a project, and not every town is as problem solving as I would say Canandaigua has been. So we're happy that we have the opportunity to deliver future phases here. I think the trick is going to be getting the state to award that and look at this particular community as needing additional units. And I think just from the examples you reference, our own experience with a waiting list of over 100 for Creekview, it's certainly there. So whatever letters or calls can be made, certainly is going to help both of us achieve our goals.
It's interesting about this. First of all, this has been a great meeting. I've learned a lot about it. And when I first started with this committee, I'll use the word stuck. I think I was stuck in an area where I was just looking at a number. You look at the price of homes around here, and I frequently would hear, well, it's $270,000, $300,000. That's not affordable housing, you know, and I always looked at it that way, saying, why can't we get that price down? But listening to this, you know, the difference in government layers and the amount of money that it costs just in soft costs alone, it's no wonder, you know, and unfortunately, is the word I'll use, in the paper and on news reports, you'll see a headline, you know, homes at $90,000, tiny homes, that type of thing. That's not what we're after. Not at all. So thanks. This is good.
So who are the people we should be hounding about this once a year competition for tax credits? Senator Helming.
Yeah, Greg, what would your suggestions?
Do
Yeah,
local bankers have any leverage?
I think it's important for local elected officials to contact the people at HCR, which includes, and Doug has mentioned this name a couple times. So Lenny Strill would be one, but actually direct to the commissioner of HCR. And I can send you guys or you folks a list of contacts at HCR that you know, you just call them up and say, you know, we just want you to know that XYZ apartment is a major priority for us. And yes, coming from Doug and the supervisor and and Senator Helming and any other elected official, whether they be on the Republican side or the Democratic side, it doesn't matter, because it's for that community, and pushing that forward is a good thing.
The other thing that I guess I would just add, having been on that side before, the more people, groups like this, committees that are contacting Assemblyman Gallagher, Senator Helming, Senator Schumer, Senator Gillibrand, and asking them to advocate to HCR in Albany, then you start to get the attention. As Greg was saying, the list and moving it up the priority list. Well, if I'm HCR and I've got all these senators and assembly members calling me, what was that thing called again? Creekview? I got to look that up and understand that a little bit more, right?
Yeah, that sounds right, Doug, and you certainly know that side a little bit more than I do, for sure. But that sounds right. I mean, yeah, they're going to be pushed.
So it sounds like, just thinking about kind of the various levers that make this type of a project possible. Low income housing tax credits obviously is a big one here. You guys talked a little bit about density. And obviously there's a factor of scale. You've got 4 phases. Phase 1 sounded like, you know, it carried a lot of additional costs that you're hoping you'll recoup through the extra phases. Is there a threshold or a tipping point as you look at a project where you say this is too small, there's just not an opportunity, but after you get to X number of units, it becomes more viable in terms of a project and development? Is there a scale in terms of how that works, and what? I guess probably the low income housing tax credit may factor in there too, in terms of what a minimum size project might even be applicable to that, but.
Yeah, you go ahead, Paul.
No, I was going to say that's a great question, because Greg, you know, I think just on my periphery knowledge of your world and what you're dealing with, sometimes, you know, the projects have to be scaled appropriately. And Creekview at 96 units tends to be probably a little bit of a larger type of project, right?
Yes, it's definitely on the larger side. Over the last 3 or 4 years, the project size has been going down primarily because of cost, whether it be on the hard side or the soft side. So the sweet spot seems to be between 75 and 85 units. That seems to be where the average apartment size seems to be hitting. So there are some at 50 and there are some at 100, but outside of New York City, that seems to be the sweet spot. So yes, Creekview is a little bit on the heavy side at 96 units. If it's not funded, maybe we need to rethink 96, and maybe we need to go 88, or maybe we need to go to 80, or maybe it goes market. So these are the things that we have to contemplate and really have a conversation. If not funded by HCR come November, Paul's point, we need to sit down, we need to talk to them, we need to talk to you folks at the town and see how we can manage getting through this project.
So can you send to Doug the the contact information for the HCR commissioner,
Yes.
please? Is that all for those people?
Well, and then our elected, and elected support really does become critical because those letters of support or even the phone calls, those actually do get attention. So I would include for our area, Senator McGallahan, Senator Helmy, our two state elected representatives. Also include our congressional and our U.S. senatorial offices. They weigh in on projects like this all the time. And so, we can put together a list. for
I
everybody.
have Senator Helming's phone number.
Oh.
Interesting. And so when it comes to awarding these tax credits, does New York City get more than the areas in Western and upstate? Or is it pretty well evenly allocated?
So that's a good question, and it used to be that yes, they did get a little bit more, but then in the last 10 years or so, it's really been a 50-50 split. And from the city, the 5 boroughs, and then everything else is upstate, right? So even like White Plains is considered upstate. So, but Western New York in general, and Finger Lake region, even more so, has definitely received its fair share of low-income housing tax credits. So I would say that it's a 50-50 split at this point, and they do try to recognize each region and each project in those regions, and no more than 2 projects to any given developer in any given year. So you might submit 5 applications. At most, you're only going to get 2, and very rarely do you get 2. So the agency does like to spread it out between regions and between developers and New York City and upstate.
But the fact though that you have a successful project already going in the town of Canandaigua, does that make you gain points or lose points?
There is no rubric for that, but you would think that it would help us gain points because we have a successful project that has a successful waiting list, that is energy efficient, cutting edge. You would think that we're bringing different, leveraging money to the deal. You would think that would put us over the top. I truly believe that behind the scenes, HCR is taking a look at the Farmington, Canandaigua area, saying, we've put a lot of money into that area recently. Maybe we need to be focused on other areas. I really believe that is some of the perception that HCR has. Kind of cool it on that region for a year or 2 And I could be wrong, but that's kind of the perception that I'm getting from what I'm kind of hearing through the grapevine.
How about county economic development boards and corporations? Does input from them have any weight with the HCR people?
It does. The Finger Lakes Regional Economic Development Council has supported not only Creekview, but is supporting Creekview Phase 2. But and while it's appreciated, it's a generic letter necessary, a little bit more and it's not signed by Mr. Esposito because he can't support individual projects, but he can support the concept of affordable housing in different areas. Hope I described that correctly, but that's my understanding with the Regional Economic Development Committee.
So do you have any other projects similar to this in Ontario County, or are we the only one?
You're the only one in Ontario County. In
All right, so
Onondaga County,
I'm on the Ontario County Economic Development Board. Would something from someone in that capacity have a little weight with the HCR?
I definitely think so.
Okay.
I think at this point, they're not going to receive any letters or documents or anything for our application. That time has come. But the point that we've been talking about, a phone call
Phone
from
call.
somebody
Okay.
to the agency, phone calls to the agency to really push Creekview would certainly be received and be noticed.
Okay, I can see if I can get that to happen. Anything
That
else?
would be great.
Anything else, anybody? Nash, Tom? I think, wow, you guys have really kind of overloaded our brain capacity here. Well, mine.
Well,
You kidding me? Greg was just getting warmed up.
Hey.
You know, the big problem is, it has to be the people that think it's just not a real issue. And there are so many people that think that, but when I hear that you have 100 on your waiting list, and I had heard this prior to meeting with you. I mean, what do people think? We're a relatively rural, small town, and to know that there's 100 people on one waiting list for affordable housing, and there are several affordable housing areas here. You know, and of course I'm old and I have old friends who are trying to get affordable senior housing, and there are waiting lists there also. I just don't know how to beat it into people that there is an issue.
Well, sadly, we're not unique. You can go to Geneva, you can go to
I know.
any community in this state, and they're all going to tell you the same thing. We need more affordable housing.
Yeah,
Whether it's
absolutely.
for old people, whether it's for folks that don't make enough money, you know, it's the tough thing is rising to the top of the people that make the most noise, I guess. I don't know.
Well, and I'm famous for saying, you know, we really need to start thinking outside the box. And especially for issues like this. So I commend you for the net zero energy and the things that you're doing. I think that is a step forward. That not all developers do. So
Well, we're so fortunate to have somebody like Greg and Paul and Mr. DeMarco lives here in the community also. He's a Canandaigua resident. I mean, just even to be able to call them to set up this meeting.
yes,
and that they're willing to come to the table and have this conversation. We can't thank you guys enough for your continued
Yes.
investment and commitment to Canandaigua, and that's why we love working with you guys. You're awesome.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Doug. And it, same goes from our end. We enjoy working with the town of Canandaigua. So we're happy to be here and
So-
spend some time with you guys.
If you are able to achieve these tax credits for phase two, you don't have any issues with the town of Canandaigua planning board or anything. It's all, that's a good relationship. right?
Well, that Tom guy was a little tough to get through, but the planning board and every member of the the town of Canandaigua staff have been tremendous. So we can't say enough about the great support and commitment that they have had. So for the DeMarco group, but also for this project.
But what I would say is Karen serves on the Ontario County Regional Economic Development Council. Not the right-
Or
whatever it is. It would be helpful when we get to the point to have a group like that understand the importance of this, because we do run into red tape and additional hurdles at the county level. That the county, if there was another entity at the county that was helping us clear some of those hurdles, it would help things along immensely.
He's putting me on the spot here. Well, yeah, I'm known for having a big mouth and at both the town and the county levels, so.
Well, I think that's right, Doug, and Karen, what I think Doug's referring to is not only just for Creekview, but other projects in the town. There is going to be some limiting growth that the town will experience if the county isn't investing back in their infrastructure, like sewers, which rather than put it on the private developer, they need to plan appropriately. They need to understand what the town's comprehensive plans are. They need to understand what the town's goals and initiatives are. They're charging connection fees. They're charging fees for using sewers that is to go back and invest in infrastructure for their ability to collect and treat wastewater, and not tell a project, no, you don't, we can't give you capacity. From the day we started, when Greg and I first met with the county, Ontario County Public Works for sewer, it was like there was no one on the other side of the table from us as far as an individual willing to help. It was, now we really don't do that. You guys figure out if you can connect to our sewer. And it was kind of disheartening, but through a lot of muscling through red tape, we were able to achieve Creekview. And that wasn't, solely on our own. That was working with the town. But Doug is very accurate in alluding to future red tape that not only this project, but other projects will experience in that corridor if the county doesn't invest back in their infrastructure.
And it's not just this corridor, it's also uptown, which is where we've said that we want, more dense development and everything else. And, yes, we've cut a few pieces of tape, but there's a whole lot more layers of tape there that needs to be cut.
Well, just thinking out loud, all of what you're saying also applies to economic development in the county, Ontario County.
That's
Because
right.
a key element is, guess what? Affordable housing. And you're telling me a key element of affordable housing is infrastructure. So I have no problem bringing it to the table. And typically when I bring it to the Economic Development Corporation table, it goes to the IDA table too, and whoever else will listen. So I'm willing to do that. Our goal is to create a community, and a community needs economic development, but a community also needs the housing. to
Yep.
support that economic development, so I'll see what I can do.
Thank you. And I apologize, I have to run. It sounds like we're wrapping up. I had a 2 o'clock call that people are texting me on, so.
Okay. We
Thanks,
really
Bob.
appreciate.
Oh,
both
thank
of
you.
coming.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. We'll
That's
be
great.
Glad
back.
to see everyone. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye now.